You're listening to Trump Loves a Swanky Ballroom. So did the Guiilded Elite, a news story written by Anne Brannigan and Roxanne Roberts, and read by an AI-generated voice. Whipped by wind and surrounded by a phalanx of stern-looking men in gray and blue suits, President Donald Trump stood on the roof of the White House, surveying the land around him. Asked why he was up there, Trump said he was taking a little walk and looking for more ways to spend my money for the country. "What are you going to build up there?" one reporter hollered at the president. Trump gesticulated, outlining the shape of a dome with his hands. "Something beautiful," he replied. For Trump, that beautiful something is a $200 million, 90,000 square foot ballroom. He has long sought such a space, creating versions of it for himself in his homes and his hotels, and, appalled by White House state dinners held in luxurious tents on the South Lawn, he even offered to build one for President Barack Obama. The addition would be the largest construction project at the People's House in more than a century. Its proposed footprint nearly as large as the White House. Yes, the entire White House complex. Initial renderings bear all the hallmarks of Trump's opulent Louis XIV-inspired aesthetic, which has always borrowed heavily from the Baroque. Very dramatic, very embellished, with lots of gold and gilded elements. Trump has called it a great legacy project. The proposed room is awash in white and gold, lined with rows of theatrical arched windows. There are towering candelabras and gargantuan crystal chandeliers. It resembles the ballrooms Trump constructed at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, and his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. Both ballrooms were Trump-designed additions to homes with grand entertaining spaces. "I modeled the interior after Versailles, and there is nothing like it in the United States," Trump bragged about his Mar-a-Lago ballroom in a 2005 interview with Florida Design magazine. The Donald J. Trump Grand Ballroom was completed in time for his wedding to his third wife, and now the First Lady, Melania. The 20,000 square foot space cost $40 million, including at least $7 million worth of embellishments, such as gold leafing. The White House ballroom plans have concerned architectural purists and critics who have long jeered at his flashy aesthetic. And the plan has raised questions. Specifically, which private donors will contribute to the project, and what that could mean for an administration already saddled with accusations of corruption and pay-to-play. It's a weird, decades-long fixation for a president who wanted a White House ballroom years before he became president, although he hosted just 2 state dinners during his first term. But majestic spaces are where the political and social elite, kings, aristocrats, tycoons, have traditionally asserted and cemented their power. It was a place where these structures of society were reiterated and brought into being, a kind of social, political, dynastic space of performance, said Robert Wellington, author of the forthcoming book, Versailles Mirrored, The Power of Luxury from Louis XIV to Donald Trump. Sun King flash to Gilded Age panache. The modern ballroom, the one most of the American bourgeoisie have come into contact with, is a staid, multimodal commercial space, a cavernous hotel room with collapsible wall panels in aggressively beige tones, a perfectly adequate place for hosting weddings, charity dinners, and professional conferences. Ask anyone to describe a ballroom, though, and most will conjure something from HBO's The Gilded Age, or the equally romanticized Bridgerton, where fictional aristocrats dance, flirt, and gossip in gorgeous marbled halls. The word derives from the Latin ballare, meaning to dance, and signifies a large space reserved for, well, dancing. Call it a ballroom, grand salon, great hall, or gallery. Historically, it's a space in palaces and other large residences big enough for large dance performances and parties. These were not the exclusive prerogative of royalty, but having one was a sign that you were rich. Really, really rich. There are beautiful ballrooms all over Europe, and they served a vital role for royals and other nobles to host ceremonial events. None is more famous than King Louis XIV's Versailles and its Hall of Mirrors, a favorite source of inspiration for Trump. Built in the 17th century, it's more of a grand gallery than an actual ballroom. The 8,000 square foot hallway was the backdrop for the Sun King and his dazzling reign. All this spectacle served a political purpose, Wellington noted. The journey through the hall presented a clear narrative of the monarch and his glory, starting from the Salon de la Guerre, the war room, which depicted the king on horseback, trampling his enemies, leading through the Hall of Mirrors and ending with the Salon de la Paix, the peace room, where his throne was occasionally placed. The intended effect was to highlight that the power and glory of the king was inextricably intertwined with the grandeur of his country. Versailles was a signature undertaking for Louis XIV. Rather than expand other royal palaces, the king chose to convert a modest royal hunting lodge into a culture-defining wonder. The idea was that he wanted to create something that was always tied to his name, Wellington said. Colonial Americans, even those who spent time in the courts of Europe, initially rejected the ballroom and other trappings of royalty. They built homes with smaller, multi-purpose spaces that could be used daily but converted for entertaining. Parlors, drawing rooms, dining rooms. One of the few exceptions was the White House East Room, the largest in the executive mansion at about 2,800 square feet, with the understanding that the president would be entertaining large numbers. Then the United States became a global economic power, and ballrooms began popping up in the private residences of the very wealthy. We can't forget that there is always a relationship between architecture and economy, said Rebecca Beaulieu, an expert on 19th century American architecture. When times are good and money is flowing, you will see more decorative, more ornate architecture. During the second half of the 19th century, commonly known as the Gilded Age, an era defined by vast fortunes and Trump's beloved tariff policies, newly rich industrialists built palatial homes with rooms dedicated solely to hosting large-scale formal events. Many had architectural elements imported from Europe. The ballrooms became a showcase for wealth and social status. It was one of the architectural features that someone could put into their residence to signify that they are wealthy individuals and that they are self-identifying with the American elite, Beaulieu said. Whether they had been in America for generations with historical wealth, or made that money 10 years ago through the railroads or through steel, they now could assert their place as a dominant member of American elite society through things like a ballroom. The ballrooms could host a lot of people, Beaulieu said, but they were also created to exclude the social climbers and other riffraff. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor's The 400, a list of New York's social establishment, was allegedly the number of people who could fit into her Fifth Avenue ballroom. In truth, the room could probably hold more. Astor confidant Ward McAllister coined the phrase to officially anoint the elites of the city. "If you go outside that number," he told the New York Tribune in 1888, "you strike people who are either not at ease in a ballroom or else make other people not at ease." Astor's annual ball, which capped the winter social season, was the most coveted invitation of the year. But it was new money, led by Alva Vanderbilt, that took the ballroom to new heights. Like Trump, she was notoriously ambitious and never took no for an answer. The parties were legendary, her summer cottage in Newport, Rhode Island, jaw-dropping. No money was spared. Vanderbilt's marble house cost $11 million in 1892, about $380 million in today's dollars. The Gold Ballroom, inspired by Versailles and the French royal courts, boasted 22-karat gold leaf applied to carved wood panels. Portraits of Louis XIV hung from the walls. For these nouveau dynasties, the ballroom was the place by which society cemented its values, Wellington said. The cotillion and debutante balls were where young men and women could meet each other and marry into the right kinds of families, he added. In 1898, Mary Scott Townsend purchased a huge residence in Washington's DuPont Circle, then added 2 wings, one for a grand library, the other for a white and gold ballroom to host her daughter's debut into society. Every year she had a ball on her daughter's birthday until the 1920s, said Isabelle Gournay, a trustee of the Cosmos Club Historic Preservation Foundation. In 1950, the mansion was purchased by the private club, which uses the ballroom for dinners and lectures, and rents it out for weddings and balls, outdoing his ballroom at the Winter White House. The private ballroom fell out of favor with the Revenue Act of 1916, which significantly increased the tax rates for the very wealthy. But there were still devotees. Serial heiress Marjorie Merriweather Post, who inherited a vast fortune in 1914, built Mar-a-Lago. The Palm Beach estate, stretching from Lake Worth to the Atlantic Ocean, was completed in 1927 and boasted 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms, and 110,000 square feet of pure opulence. Gold leaf, Spanish tiles, Italian marble, Venetian silks. The mansion was designed for entertaining, both for Post's social and charity events. According to her New York Times obituary, she built Mar-a-Lago because her first Florida home became too small for her parties. But she went even bigger. In the 1950s, Post added an 11,000 square foot white and gold ballroom to the estate. Upon her death in 1973, Post willed the 17-acre estate to the federal government in the hopes that it could be a winter White House, a retreat for presidents and diplomats. The government, however, ultimately concluded that it was too costly to maintain. Trump purchased the property for about $10 million in 1985, and Mar-a-Lago has since become synonymous with Trump himself to the public. Palm Beach Society did not admit him into its private clubs, so he converted Mar-a-Lago into his own members-only club. He opened his new ballroom just in time for a New Year's Eve bash and his lavish 2005 wedding to Melania, with guests such as Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barbara Walters, Billy Joel, and The Apprentice creator Mark Burnett. Aside from Trump's personal parties, it can be rented out for banquets, charity events, and weddings by its members. But unlike with his commercial properties, Trump can't rent out a White House ballroom, and there are very few occasions requiring seating for 650 people, so it's unclear how often he will use it or whether it will even be completed by the end of his second term. It's bonkers, Wellington said of the ballroom plans. He notes that according to the current design, it looks more like a space from a luxury hotel built in the 1980s or 90s, and it's about 10 times the size of Versailles Hall of Mirrors. I didn't quite believe it, because it seemed to completely overshadow the existing building. Greater than any practical purpose, however, this is a reflection of how Trump, a man who prides himself on being a builder of beautiful things, sees himself, his presidency, and his legacy, like the newly gilded Oval Office. For Trump, magnitude is a preoccupation that reflects his power, crowd sizes, signature long ties, his big, beautiful bill. Such a grand space as the ballroom also reinforces Trump's narrative of a new Gilded Age, as well as its tensions, his promise of making America great again, wrapped in a Versailles veneer. The optics of building a ballroom in a residential space in 2025 draws a very straight line to the socioeconomic stratification of late 19th century Gilded Age America, said Beaulieu, the architectural historian. This is before the middle class existed, when there was a huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots. That's exactly what we are messaging with something like this. I don't think that we can overstate that enough. That architecture is a reflection of society.